Here's a short little introduction to scientific notations. We're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing numbers in scientific notations, plus talking about some of the basic rules. So for the first example, we're adding these two numbers, but I want you to kind of think of these two numbers in terms of like terms. That's something that you use in algebra. For example, you can add x plus x, but you cannot add x squared plus x because they're not like terms. The same thing kind of goes here. Because we have a 10 to the third and a 10 to the fourth, we can't add them up. They're not the same thing. What we can do is we can change this number to become 10 to the fourth. That way we can add it to this number. So if I were to change this to 10 to the fourth, I am making this exponent bigger by 1. So I'm going to make this number smaller by 1 decimal point. So I'm just going to move that decimal point over to get 0.49. Then I'm going to add that to my 1.7 times 10 to the fourth. And here's the beauty of this, very, very simple. All I have to do in my calculator is the 0.49 plus 1.7. And I can do it in my head. I just want to double check and make sure I'm not giving you the wrong answer. That gives me 2.19 times 10 to the fourth. So when you're adding or subtracting, your value with your exponent, your 10 with your exponent, stays the same. Same thing when you're subtracting. So these values are both 10 to the fifth, so they are the same. I can go ahead and just subtract these numbers. So when I do, I get, let's see, 8.29 minus 5.66. That gives me 2.63. My answer will be times 10 to the fifth because you're just adding and subtracting the numbers, so your exponent should not change. This is in scientific notation, so I'm going to keep it in scientific notation. The next one gets a little bit trickier because we have multiplication. So when we multiply and divide, we are going to change the exponents. But when we multiply, we end up adding the exponents. And when we divide, we end up subtracting the exponents. So what we're going to do, because we're multiplying, we're actually going to multiply these two numbers. So these two numbers we're actually going to multiply. That's 3.33 times 2.12. And because each of these uses 3 sig figs, I'm going to write my answer out to 3 sig figs, which rounds to 7.06 times 10 to the something. It is important that you remember, that you memorize the value. You need to know that whenever you are multiplying, you are adding those exponents every time, and that gives you a value of 9. So negative 2 plus 11 is 9. I've been having trouble writing 9s today, forgive me. So that gives us our final answer. And then with this final answer, or with this final problem right here, we're dividing two numbers, so we're going to divide the two numbers. Now when we multiply, we added the exponents. Multiplication and division are opposites. And the same thing with addition and subtraction. So when we're multiplying, we're adding exponents. When we're dividing, we're subtracting exponents. So we're going to divide those numbers, these numbers right here, we'll divide those. 9.13 divided by 7.0, or just 7. The smallest number of sig figs used is in this number. That's 2 sig figs. So I'm just going to round to the nearest second sig fig. So 1.3, I don't need a third decimal, times, and then I subtract my exponents. 5 minus 3 is 2. So always subtract your exponents no matter what numbers you have here, positive or negative. It is always the top exponent minus the bottom exponent. And I have other videos up for scientific notation examples on YouTube and on Edmodo that you can check out where we have negative numbers and positive numbers in here. If you had, for example, 5 and a negative 3, you would have to subtract 5 minus negative 3. which is the same thing as 5 plus 3. So you do have to be careful with that. Thankfully, we have two positive numbers, so that makes it a little bit easier. I hope this clears up some confusion on the basic rules. If you would like more examples and different problems to try out, I have other videos for that as well.